could you talk more about 5-HTP and SSRIs? Remember I emailed you that powder that my client stumbled upon. So I have a client, I have two clients, but I have one client who I'm thinking about trying to write up. I always forget and I get sidetracked, but writing up a little case presentation for you to put on your website. He's a recovering alcoholic and he's detoxed. He's gone to 3 rehabs in his life.
Mm-hmm.
2 of them in the jungles of India. He's East Indian,
Mm.
American East Indian and American.
Yeah.
And he the last time he detoxed, so he was 22 days sober on Tuesday, but he had said the week before or the 2 weeks before that and I'm slightly paraphrasing, but he said that using the aminos was the easiest detox he's ever experienced in his years of doing this. He's like, you're sitting on $1 billion industry. And I was like, oh, okay. But we had done the chart way before and he was not always taking it, but once he decided to detox, he was taking, and it was on his own accord, he was doing it every 2 to 3 hours on the right when he was stopped drinking, and he had the shakes and everything, and now he's to every 4 hours, and he'll say, I'll notice I start getting upset and I'll realize, oh, it's been 4 hours or 5 hours, I gotta take my aminos. So, and he's the one that was on Instagram and saw that ad for that powder I sent you that you heard of them or him.
Oh, that powder, okay, yes, got you.
Balance something or another.
Right.
But it was him who told me about that powder, and he goes, Mother-Ann, everything I'm taking is in that powder. I said, I know, it's aminos. So that's really, I'm so proud of him. And and he was saying every rehab should have anyhow, it's just a really nice situation. My question is, I have another client who I've presented to you many times, Michelle, my recovering alcoholic, who's very overweight, and she just she just has one excuse after another of not taking the aminos. But when I told her about this powder, she was like, oh my God, I could do the powder. I could do that. But she takes an SSRI. And so I know that you had said in our class that you could take it about 4 to 5 hours after, and she takes it at nighttime. So she thought she could take the powder in the morning. But I was wondering if you could maybe I can go back to my lecture.
She can take the powder upon arising and at lunch.
Okay.
What is that powder again?
It's called, I'll tell you, it's called Restore. It's called
BioRestore.
Rebalance.
Yeah. Bio Rebalance.
That's what it looks like.
Rebalance. Why don't you put it in the chat, Modern-Ann?
Okay.
I don't know that one.
It's fair. It's new. It's came out, I think, within the last year. Chris Ingen, who's part of our community, kind of consulted with Chris Scott, who has a big sort of Fit for Life program where they do addiction recovery and working out and all sorts of things.
I know him. I mean, of him.
Anyway, he was the one that developed this product, and it has all of the nutrients and amino acids you need to, restore neurotransmitter function in general for somebody with addiction, kind of like Dr. Blum's stuff. And there are pros and cons to doing it this way. The pros are that it's much easier for some people. And if doing it this way is what it takes to get the aminos in them, then that's what you want to do. And then you do it for a couple of weeks, them really following a schedule. Then you redo the amino acid therapy chart and you check and see what's missing, what's gotten better, what hasn't gotten better. And by that time, their brain hopefully is functioning sufficiently better that they can add whatever missing amino acid is needed. You know, maybe that one of the aminos you need a higher dose. This is where you personalize it.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you, because this one, Michelle, who she's open to doing, she's in recovery, and she's had maybe, she just slipped 3 weeks ago, but she usually slips about once or twice a year, so it's not very often. But I also think that she has a liver issue, but she's about to possibly move to Minnesota. But for her, I just, like, I've done the charts, I've done it, and she just, it's funny, the only amino that she personally really liked and she could notice a difference was the L-tyrosine. But I was trying to get her to take the 5, not the 5-HTP, I was trying to get her to take the the GABA and L-theanine. I mean, you've heard me talk about her for so long, and she's come such a long way from when I started working with her 4 years.
She has.
Yeah. So it's huge. But she was really into this powder, and so I just wanted to check. Could you talk a little bit maybe about what happens if a person does take, because I'm surprised that they don't have a disclaimer on. I mean, I might order the powder to look at it, but I'm surprised it doesn't say on somewhere big, don't take this with an SSRI, but
because there may not be enough 5-HTP or tryptophan in it to put somebody at risk of serotonin syndrome. Okay, so the risk is serotonin syndrome.
Right.
But you really have to get a lot, somebody's serotonin levels have to already be very high. And for them actually to be on the edge of serotonin syndrome anyway on the SSRIs they're on, for added precursor to pop them over that line.
And what would happen if it popped over, like symptoms?
So people who die from ecstasy overdose are dying from serotonin syndrome.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. So, and people do die from this. Let's put the amino acids to one side for a minute. If people are on like 2 SSRIs and their serotonin is already running hot, even though they may still have symptoms, the symptoms may actually be because their serotonin is, running a little too high, but nobody's noticing that. And then they add a migraine med to it. Or they add one of the antibiotics that's serotonergic, and people can land in the emergency room with shaking, shivering, muscle rigidity, nausea, vomiting, headaches. There's a whole list of serotonin syndrome symptoms that you can look up online and that are on, on my slides in the serotonin lecture. Yeah. It's all there. So just go back and review those slides. But it matters in that you don't want to give somebody a couple 100 milligrams of 5-HTP at the same time as their SSRI. It matters if they've been on a lot of SSRI for a long time and you give them 50 milligrams of 5-HTP and all of a sudden they get really weird, uncomfortable symptoms. Okay, this has happened to me 3 times in my entire career. So it doesn't happen very often, but that's a sign that the person is actually already on that line. They're and already just tip them over, and this is where the doctor just needs to pull them off the medication. And this is one few times that you can come off it really quickly. But taking this powder, 6 hours away from the medication, especially if her serotonin scores are still high, should be just fine.
Yeah, she doesn't have any of those other symptoms, and she's, she.
Yeah, but you see, Kathy, 200 milligrams 5-HTP on an antidepressant is a really bad idea.
Yeah.
Right? I don't ever recommend anybody trialing 5-HTP if somebody is on an SSRI. And again, you can't just use the term antidepressant. You've got to be really specific as to what type of antidepressant it is, because this isn't going to happen with Wellbutrin, you see.
Right. Because that's my other question is I have a new client who is having major he has a lot of anxiety and some depression, or definitely anxiety and depression, but it's showing up in a lot of anger outbursts.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not on any meds, but it's so bad that I did end up with a release, called his primary who referred him to me, who I know. And so her and I spoke, and I suggested that he go on to Wellbutrin because I knew I could still do.
I mean, yes, I think that's great, but I don't think you needed to.
But he wasn't taking the other stuff, and it was to the point where they were almost going to call the police for domestic violence. I mean, he's just out of control.
Okay, well, sure. I mean, if absolutely, if he's not going to be taking the amino acids, then, and he's more willing to take that. But that's the type of person, Modern Ann, actually we would put on lithium orotate.
Oh, okay. I was thinking about that.
That's exactly your lithium orotate presentation.
Okay. And he can take lithium orotate with the Wellbutrin.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how much would you start? I mean, that workshop I went to, it said pretty small.
I would start with 5 milligrams twice a day.
Okay.
Or, I mean, start with 5 milligrams once a day, right? But then I would be thinking you're going to end up with 5 milligrams twice a day.
Okay.
I know that Dr. Greenblatt starts with even lower doses, but I've never had a problem starting somebody on 5 milligrams a day, sublingual.
Right. So, So the other thing, and I don't have my notes because I'm at my home, this other client, he has a physical medical issue where his throat, he can't swallow very well. And so he can't take pills. And that's why that's I think what was hard with the aminos is he had to take them all out, and he really needed them 3 to 4 times a day. And he just couldn't because he can't just pop the pill. Because I don't have my notes with me, and I wasn't planning on talking about him, but I am.
So mixing GABA in water and having him slowly swallow that might release the spasming in his throat, in his esophagus, so that he's able to swallow more easily. GABA can actually help with that particular condition.
Oh, I think you told me your husband, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Right. Would it be weird?
Very often that's an allergic reaction to foods. It can be a food allergy, but that's to one side.
I know.
He can get all of the aminos sublingually or in a spray form.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that's what we're working on. And I started him with a no dairy.
Good.
And so that was the first thing I told him, I think in my second session, when I heard about his symptoms. I just said, like, if you can try, just stop eating dairy. And so he's working really hard. He's like, I had pizza. I go, well, maybe have pizza once every 6 weeks. So I was like trying to just like negotiate with him. But because I was explaining, it takes about 2 weeks for it to get out of your system.
Well, it takes 4 days for it to get out of your system.
I know, but the inflammation.
Yes, but still, it takes 4 days. Typically, people have a improvement in symptoms on day 5, and then gradually over the next 2 weeks, things get even better and better. But on the days that he does have pizza, remind him to check and notice what symptoms have gotten worse.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I have some clients. Like I have another client in that I'm working with, and he was on major pharmaceuticals. We did amino chart with him. He started taking some of the aminos, and he went to the Dr. Amen clinic. And he told me, everything you told me is what they're telling me to telling me. And I was like, yes. I was like, you know, after the brain, and he sent me all the brain scans and everything. It was really interesting.
That's very cool.
Yeah,
and isn't that nice validation?
It's such good validation. And I actually did recommend to him to do the lithium orotate, and to start really small, and he could up the dose. And I talked to him about the lecture I had taken, because he hates that. He was meeting with a psychiatrist, and he didn't like, they were putting him on all these bipolar meds, and he hated how he was feeling.
Sure.
But the only thing is, Dr. Amen clinic, we're gonna, like, I have to look, I don't have my notes with me again, but they had suggested a way higher level, like really high level of GABA. That was the only thing that was different than what I had said.
Well, and if he needs, I mean, he will be able to determine for himself,
right,
if he needs that way high dose of GABA. You know, he just needs to start titrating up the GABA for himself until he finds his sweet spot.
Right.
Because even the Amen clinic, all we're doing is giving highly educated, highly experienced guesses.
Yeah.
And it's his job to find his own sweet spot.
Yeah. And I don't want to take all the time, but I just wanted to ask those couple questions.
No, I love this. Yeah, it's like super helpful, just in general.
Well, you know what's so funny, Christina, I kind of, after our level 1, I had the fantasy of you and I creating our own little tubes that people open up and put into their drinks. But maybe we'll still do that.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I'd love to do that with you.
So, because I just think it'd be like just like little tubes. You keep them in your purse. You're in the airplane. You have anxiety. You know, and so it's more of a quick fix. But then you would have like a list of, these are your practitioners you can work with if you want to do more of a personalized. So it'd be a way to protect the legality.
Absolutely. They have theanine infused chocolate.
I know they have quite
all kinds of stuff.
They have everything now. They have drinks. I've shown you. They have sodas. They have drinks. They have chocolates. They have gummies. They have, even Costco has their own brand of a sleep one and an anxiety one. And I've looked at the ingredients, and it has the stuff we say. Only thing I've noticed is the dose, the milligrams are very small.
Right.
That's the only thing that's different. But but even Costco has their own like huge display of aminos for anxiety.
That's so funny.
I know. Okay, well, I'll go back to the list. So the only reason I put him on is I suggested it to his doctor because he's so out of control. I was going to have to institute him.
But why Wellbutrin rather than an SSRI?
Because he had taken an I think he took Lexapro, and he did not like how it made him feel, and he wouldn't take it.
Oh, okay.
And
that makes sense.
He really, for whatever reason, he likes me. I've only seen him maybe half a dozen times, and I'm seeing him 3 times next week because his wife is out of town, and he's off the charts. I mean, he's saying he's suicidal. I don't think he is, just from how he speaks. But I'm just, and I can't get him. There's a 7-day space in Arizona that I really like, but they're booked months out. And so it was this or putting him in near Napa. There's a rehab place, but he doesn't have any addiction. It's mental only. And so he'd be in a place with recovering addicts, and that's not him.
So have you checked out Sierra Tucson in Arizona?
I haven't looked at Sierra Tucson. I was looking at, there's a place, but I'll look at them.
I would look at Sierra Tucson, okay, because they have a couple of different tracks. They are a fully licensed psychiatric hospital. And
Okay,
yes, they are a full addiction treatment program, but they also have a trauma track, an eating
Okay.
disorder track, and a chronic pain track.
okay,
And you might be able to get him into the trauma track.
okay.
Because I'm sure with that sort of behavior, you can, create a medical necessity around trauma.
Yeah. Well, I have a very good relationship with his doctor, and for whatever reason, he just trusts me. So I'm trying to be very
Yay.
tactful. Yeah, I'm trying to be very tactful, but also just like gotta work.
And how's his food?
I don't have my notes with him. I mean, it's I think he eats a lot of like cereal for breakfast, and so I'm trying to talk to him about more protein. And like I said, he does have a few medical conditions, but I don't have my notes with me, and I
would get him to Sierra Tucson. Here's why. They have a team of very good naturopathic doctors there.
Okay.
Okay. So he'd be getting some actually really good out of the box treatment.
Okay.
If he's willing to work with the naturopaths around maybe some of those medical conditions. Here's what my gut says, Modern Ann.
Mm-hmm.
He's gluten intolerant.
Mm.
Okay. And that if you can get more protein in there and start getting the gluten out, his outrageous behavior is going to settle down.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but that's where, my gut's like waving a red flag.
Okay.
Do you see him in person or on Zoom?
In person. So I'll be seeing him 3 times next week.
Okay. So I would like you to feed him in the session.
Okay.
Okay. Whatever he's eaten ahead of time, unless he's had a nice, great big hamburger ahead of time.
Right.
Give him real food. Have him rate his symptoms before and after the food.
Okay.
Either that or give him glutamine. And really, because the very first step always is to see to what degree is blood sugar an issue.
Right.
And people's reports can be so chaotic that it's hard to figure that out.
Yeah.
But if you have him in your office and you ask him, when was the last time you ate protein today? And he looks at you blankly, and you feed him, you have him rate his symptoms in the moment, feed him protein, and 20 minutes later, they're significantly lower. Okay, that is learning, experience by learning
Right.
by experience, right?
Right.
Does that seem like something you could do with him in your office?
I think so. I see him in the afternoon, so it'll be a good time to see if he's eaten what he's eaten that day. I know he eats in the morning, but again, it's like it's not a health. It's cereal, which is just not
exactly. Which is why. And I wouldn't start off the session with, hi, how are you? How are things? Or however you typically start your sessions, right? Right. I would do like 30 seconds of that. And then, would it be okay with you if we did an experiment today?
Mm-hmm.
And he looks at you and like, well, and then you say, I'm just curious, when was the last time you ate protein today? And you just do that whole thing. You feed him, you track it. If he feels better after the protein, he's going to remember that, Modern Ann.
Yeah.
And it's going to give him some control.
He felt, I mean, we did trialing aminos last week, and he did feel, and he noticeably looked different. When I gave him the 5-HTP, he noticeably looked different. And then his wife came in and did aminos as well.
Fantastic.
So, but I think that I could definitely suggest the gluten-free as well.
Yeah. Although, you're really going to have to work with him, because if he has gluten cereal for breakfast every morning, that's going to be a bit of a behavior change.
Yeah, but for whatever reason, he's very like, when I talk to him about going to treatment, he's like, well, can I still talk to you? So whatever reason, he trusts me. And so,
So
and really,
nice.
he's like, yeah, he's like, I know that you really believe in me, because he's a lot of shame around his behavior with his wife.
Of course.
Yeah.
And the thing about Sierra Tucson is if you talk to the naturopaths ahead of time, they will allow him to stay on whatever nutrient protocol you start him on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll get a release and then I can, and I told him, I said, I'll get a release and I can talk to them and support. So I'll contact them and see if I can see.
But you see, they're one of the few places that will stick to your protocol.
Yeah.
He just has to walk in with full bottles. Although they have a pretty good in-house nutraceutical pharmacy.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm going to check them out, because I've been wanting to find the place that I know of is a week long and they're booked out, but
yeah, no, this is 4 to 6 week program.
Okay.